the strange, hidden, and untold stories that make you question everything you thought you knew. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Vera, and today Kevin's about to tell me something that sounds absolutely bonkers, so this should be fun.
Oh, it's bonkers, all right. But here's the thing, V. It's also completely real. We're talking about a secret U.S. government program that ran for over 20 years, cost $20 million, and was designed to create psychic spies.
I'm sorry, what? Psychic spies? Like people who could read minds and see through walls and stuff?
Not exactly reading minds, but close. Think more like clairvoyance, remote viewing, the ability to psychically perceive distant people, places, or events without ever being there.
Kevin, are you having a stroke? Because this sounds like something out of a bad sci-fi movie.
Trust me, I had the same reaction when I first stumbled across this. But we're talking about Project Stargate, and yes, that's actually what they called it. A program that involved the CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Army, basically everyone who had clearance and a budget.
Okay. So when did this supposed psychic spy ring happen? The 1800s? Early 1900s, when people still believed in seances?
Try 1972 to 1995. We're talking about during and after the Cold War, Vera. This wasn't some Victorian parlor trick. This was modern intelligence agencies trying to weaponize ESP.
Are you serious right now?
Dead serious. And it all started because we were terrified the Soviets were beating us at the psychic game.
I can't. The psychic game? There's a psychic gap now, too?
That's literally what they called it. See, in 1970, this book came out called Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain, and it detailed all these Soviet experiments with ESP and psychokinesis. American officials read this and basically went, oh, shoot. What if the Russians figure out how to mind read our nuclear launch codes?
I mean, when you put it that way?
Right? One congressman even said that if psychic spying worked, it would be a hell of a cheap radar system. I mean, think about it. No satellites, no spy planes, no risk of getting caught. Just close your eyes and peek at enemy bases.
Okay, so panic sets in about Soviet psychic superiority. What happens next?
Well, the CIA does what the CIA does best. They throw money at the problem. In 1972, they fund Stanford Research Institute in California to start testing people who claim to have psychic abilities.
And I'm guessing they found some real winners?
Oh, they found some characters, all right. The first big subject was this guy named Ingo Swann. And yes, that's his real name. A New York artist who claimed he could psychically visit distant locations and describe them in detail.
An artist named Ingo Swann becomes America's first psychic spy. I can't even...
It gets better. They also tested Uri Geller.
Wait, the spoon-bending guy? I've seen him on TV.
That's the one. In 1973, they brought Geller to Stanford and tested him under controlled conditions. In some trials, he apparently reproduced drawings that were hidden in another room, which completely blew the minds of the CIA observers.
Okay, but Uri Geller has been debunked by magicians, hasn't he? Like, James Randi exposed his tricks?
Exactly! And that's part of what makes this whole story so fascinating. There were always skeptics pointing out the flaws, but somehow the program kept going for over 20 years.
So what convinced them to keep throwing money at this?
Stories, Vera. Incredible, tantalizing stories of success that kept everyone hooked. But before I get into those, let me paint you a picture of how this whole remote viewing thing was supposed to work.
Please do, because I'm still trying to wrap my head around the logistics of psychic spying.
So picture this. You're a remote viewer, sitting in a room with an interviewer or monitor. You might get given the most minimal information, maybe just a set of geographic coordinates or a photograph sealed in an envelope, or even just a random code name.
That's it? No briefing, no context, no, hey, we're looking for missile silos in Siberia?
Nope. The whole point was to keep it blind so you couldn't use normal reasoning or prior knowledge. Then, you'd enter this meditative state and start describing whatever images, sensations, or impressions came to mind.
And these impressions were supposed to relate to what exactly?
The target location's characteristics. So you might start sketching buildings, describing landscapes, talking about the number of people you see there, whether it feels military or civilian, indoor or outdoor.
This sounds like the world's most expensive game of charades.
Kind of. But they tried to make it scientific. They developed strict protocols, standardized questionnaires, statistical scoring systems. Over the years, they kept refining their methods, trying different approaches.
Like what kind of approaches?
Well, sometimes they'd have a beacon person physically travel to the target location while the viewer was doing their session, thinking that might strengthen the psychic connection somehow.
A psychic antenna.
Exactly. And get this, they even experimented with precognitive remote viewing,
I'm sorry. What now?
trying to psychically perceive targets that hadn't been selected yet. Like, they do the viewing session first, then randomly pick a target later and see if the description matched.
That's that's not how time works, Kevin.
I know. But apparently the laws of physics were more like suggestions to these people.
Okay, so they've got their protocols and their time-bending experiments. What were these incredible success stories that kept the money flowing?
All right, buckle up, because these stories are wild. Let's start with Rosemary Smith, this young Army maps analyst. Mid-1970s, they asked her to psychically locate a lost Soviet spy plane somewhere in Africa.
Somewhere in Africa. Do you know how big Africa is, Kevin?
Huge. But Smith goes into her trance state, describes the location in detail, and they later find the downed Soviet bomber almost exactly where she said it would be.
Okay, that's actually pretty impressive if true.
Right? But wait, there's more. Pat Price, this former police commissioner turned psychic spy, produced incredibly detailed sketches of a secret Soviet research facility. I'm talking architectural details, the layout of buildings, even the color schemes.
And when they compared these sketches to,
Satellite images of real top secret Soviet installations. The match was supposedly so close it freaked people out.
how close are we talking?
According to the accounts, Price described things like the specific placement of antennas, the configuration of underground facilities, even security measures that weren't visible from above.
That would be pretty hard to fake or guess randomly.
Exactly what everyone was thinking. But the stories get even wilder. Around the same time, they claimed remote viewers helped locate hostages, kidnapped by terrorist groups. They'd give a viewer basically no information and get back descriptions of buildings, room layouts, even details about the captors.
Did any of these hostage rescues actually succeed based on psychic intel?
That's where it gets murky. The successes were always adjacent to the psychic information. Like, the viewing might point them in the right direction, but conventional intelligence would do the heavy lifting.
Ah, so the psychics were more like very expensive magic 8 balls and
That's actually not a bad analogy. But here's one of their crown jewel stories. In 1979, a viewer named Joe McMoneagle, who later became famous in the remote viewing community, allegedly envisioned a massive Soviet Typhoon-class submarine under construction.
and this was confirmed how?
U.S. satellite photos later showed exactly what he'd described. The size, the location, even specific construction details that weren't supposed to be visible yet,
Okay, that's getting harder to explain away as coincidence.
right? And then there's the Gulf War connection. During the 1991 conflict, they claimed remote viewers helped locate Scud missile launchers that were hidden in the Iraqi desert.
Mobile missile launchers would be incredibly valuable targets.
Absolutely. These things were playing hide and seek with our forces, moving around constantly. But supposedly, viewers could sit in Maryland and pinpoint where Saddam's forces had stashed them.
Did the military actually act on this psychic intelligence?
That's the million-dollar question, V. The accounts suggest that remote viewing data was sometimes passed along to operational commanders, but it's unclear how much weight it carried in actual decision-making.
I'm guessing most generals weren't eager to risk soldiers' lives based on someone's psychic vision.
You'd think so, but here's where it gets interesting. Some of the success stories involve high-level officials who became true believers.
Such as?
Well, I mentioned Major General Albert Stubblebine earlier, the guy trying to walk through walls. But there were others. The program had supporters in Congress, in the Pentagon, even in the CIA at various points.
What convinced these serious, presumably rational people?
The combination of intriguing results and Cold War paranoia was powerful. But perhaps the most sensational claim from the program's lore involves our friend Ingo Swann again.
Oh, what did Ingo do now?
During an experimental session, he allegedly described rings around the planet Jupiter in detail, including their composition and structure,
And Jupiter does have rings.
which were confirmed by the Pioneer 10 spacecraft after Swann's vision. He supposedly had no conventional way of knowing about them at the time,
Okay, that would be genuinely impressive if it happened the way they claim.
right? These are the kinds of stories that kept believers believing. But here's where things get really interesting and weird. By the mid 1970s, the military decides they want their own psychic spy unit.
Of course they do. Can't let the CIA have all the fun.
In 1977, the Army's Intelligence Command, with Defense Intelligence Agency support, creates this small unit at Fort Meade, Maryland, and this thing goes through more code names than a witness protection program.
How many names are we talking?
It started as Project Stargate under the CIA. That stood for Scan by Coordinate. Then it became Gondola Wish. Then Grill Flame in the late 70s under Army Intelligence. Then Center Lane in the early 80s. Sunstreak in the mid 80s under DIA. And finally, Stargate by the late 80s.
They really couldn't make up their minds, could they?
I think they were trying to stay ahead of leaks and oversight. Every time someone started asking questions, boom, new code name, shuffle the paperwork.
So, what was daily life like for America's psychic warriors?
That's the best part, V. Despite all these dramatic code names, they were operating out of old wooden barracks at Fort Meade, like World War II era buildings.
The Pentagon's psychic division working out of a shed. I love it.
The unit was small, typically around a dozen people, including Army officers and enlisted soldiers, who had been trained as remote viewers. And their daily routine was both exactly what you'd expect and somehow much weirder.
Walk me through a typical day.
So they'd get assignments from various intelligence agencies, usually when conventional methods had hit a dead end. Like, hey, satellites can't find this new Soviet weapons facility. Why don't you guys take a crack at it?
The psychic cavalry to the rescue.
Exactly. They'd sit in these sessions with an interviewer, get minimal information, maybe just coordinates or a code name, then go into their meditative state and start talking.
And what kind of stuff would they say?
All over the map, literally and figuratively. Sometimes the descriptions were oddly specific. I see a rectangular building, tan-colored, with 3 satellite dishes on the roof, near a body of water.
And other times?
Complete word salad. I'm getting images of darkness, something metallic. The color blue is very strong. There's movement, but it's constrained.
That could describe anything from a submarine to a Smurf convention?
Right. But here's the thing. They'd write all this up in official reports and send them to the CIA DIA, military commands. Hundreds of these reports were generated over the years.
Did anyone ever follow up to verify the accuracy?
That was the problem. Most of what they were trying to discern remained classified or unverified. But on those rare occasions when a detail seemed to pan out,
It kept the dream alive.
exactly. And the people doing this work, they weren't cynical about it at all. They truly believed they were developing a new intelligence capability.
What kind of training did they get?
They practiced meditation techniques, studied various approaches to altered states of consciousness. Some were connected to the Monroe Institute, which researches out-of-body experiences.
This sounds less like military training and more like a spiritual retreat.
The unit developed this almost cult-like camaraderie. They were dealing with phenomena that most of their colleagues in the broader intelligence community found completely bizarre, so they bonded over the shared weirdness.
I bet their security clearance interviews were interesting. So tell us about your ability to psychically penetrate enemy installations.
Right? But here's where the story takes a darker turn, V. Being a psychic spy took a serious psychological toll on some people.
How so?
Think about it. You're spending hours every day trying to mentally project yourself across the globe, visualizing enemy facilities, sometimes dealing with disturbing or violent imagery.
That sounds like it could mess with your head.
It absolutely did. There are reports of remote viewers struggling with stress, confusion, difficulty distinguishing between their visions and reality. Some started having trouble sleeping. Others became obsessed with conspiracy theories.
Occupational hazard of being a professional psychic, I guess.
A few of them began reporting increasingly outlandish visions. Not just enemy military bases, but UFOs, alien beings, underground civilizations, time travel scenarios.
Sir, I've located the Soviet missile base, and also there are lizard people living in the basement.
You joke, but this was a real problem for their supervisors. How do you evaluate the credibility of someone whose job description is literally see things that aren't there?
Fair point. What happened to the viewers who went off the deep end?
Some had legitimate psychological breakdowns and were sent for psychiatric care. Others were quietly transferred to different assignments. The program tried to screen for mental stability, but
But they were actively seeking people who claimed to have supernatural abilities.
exactly. It's like posting a job listing for stable, rational person with magical powers. You're kind of selecting for a certain type of personality to begin with.
And then there's the institutional culture you mentioned.
Oh, the culture got really weird, V. By the 1980s, unit members were openly discussing astral projection, psychic healing, consciousness expansion, alongside their official intelligence duties.
How did the Pentagon brass react to all this New Age stuff?
That's where Major General Albert Stubblebine comes back into our story. As the Army's chief of intelligence, he was supposed to be the voice of reason overseeing the program.
Instead, he's the guy trying to walk through walls.
Right. Stubblebine became convinced that if the mind could perceive distant locations, maybe it could also influence physical matter. So he'd allegedly stand in his office and run at the wall, expecting to pass through it.
I'm imagining his aide hearing this loud thump from the general's office every afternoon.
Sir, should I call medical? No, Sergeant, I just need to believe harder.
This explains so much about why the program eventually got shut down.
You can imagine the conversations happening in the Pentagon. General, your psychic spies are reporting alien encounters, and their commanding officer has a concussion from trying to quantum tunnel through drywall.
Perhaps it's time to reevaluate our paranormal warfare budget.
Exactly. And this was happening right as the Cold War was winding down. The original justification, fear of Soviet psychic superiority, was becoming less compelling.
Plus, the Soviet Union was kind of falling apart.
Right. Hard to justify spending millions on psychic countermeasures when your enemy can't afford to keep the lights on in the Kremlin.
So, how did it all end?
By the early 1990s, pressure was mounting from multiple directions. Congress was asking harder questions about defense spending. Scientists were calling for rigorous evaluation of these programs.
And the wall walking general wasn't helping the cause?
Not at all. In 1991, all the various psychic research efforts were consolidated under the single code name Project Stargate and placed primarily under DIA management.
One last attempt to make it legitimate?
Seems that way. They contracted most of the work to Science Applications International Corporation, SAIC, trying to bring some corporate professionalism to the whole thing.
Did that help?
For a few years, maybe. But the writing was on the wall. In 1995, Congress finally said, enough is enough.
What triggered the final shutdown?
Congress directed the CIA to take over the program from DIA and conduct a comprehensive evaluation of its effectiveness. Basically, you guys figure out if this psychic stuff actually works or not.
And the CIA's response was?
They commissioned an independent scientific review through the American Institutes for Research. This was serious stuff, V. They brought in a blue ribbon panel of experts.
What kind of experts?
Statisticians, psychologists, research methodologists. They even included people from both sides of the debate. Jessica Utz was a statistician who was sympathetic to parapsychology, while Ray Hyman was a prominent skeptic.
So they couldn't claim the review was biased against psychic phenomena.
Exactly. These reviewers spent months going through 2 decades of Stargate experiments, reports, data analysis, thousands of pages of documentation.
That must have been quite a reading assignment.
Can you imagine? Honey, how was work today? Oh, just reviewing 20 years of government psychic spy reports. Pass the bourbon.
So, what did this comprehensive review conclude?
The results were sobering. While they noted some statistically significant results in laboratory data, they found no compelling evidence that psychic information had ever actually helped national security.
So, all those amazing success stories you told me about?
When examined under strict scrutiny, they mostly fell apart. The reviewers concluded that the successful sounding results could be explained by chance, selective interpretation, or information leaks.
Let me guess. The celebrated cases didn't hold up either?
Nope. That Soviet bomber in Africa that Rosemary Smith allegedly located, the reviewers suggested she might have had access to more conventional information than originally acknowledged.
And Pat Price's detailed sketches of Soviet facilities?
Could have been based on open source intelligence he'd seen, or just generic drawings that were retroactively matched to real sites.
What about Ingo Swann's Jupiter rings prediction?
Here's the kicker. Planetary scientists had already suspected Jupiter might have rings based on theoretical models. So it was either an educated guess or an incredible coincidence.
So every single miraculous story has a mundane explanation.
According to the skeptics, yes. But here's where it gets interesting. Even Jessica Utz, the statistician who was sympathetic to parapsychology, agreed that the program wasn't useful for intelligence purposes.
Wait, really?
She famously concluded that while the laboratory evidence suggested something beyond chance might be happening in some of the data, whatever slight effects might exist weren't reliable enough for real-world intelligence use.
So even a believer said it didn't work for its intended purpose.
Exactly. In September 1995, the CIA and Department of Defense announced that Project Stargate would be terminated and declassified.
After 23 years and $20 million?
Yep. America's experiment in psychic espionage was officially over. But here's the fascinating part. The declassification process gave us unprecedented access to the program's archives.
What kind of stuff was in those archives?
Everything, V. Remote viewing session transcripts, analysis reports, research studies, internal memos. The CIA released thousands of pages of previously classified documents.
And what did researchers find when they dug through all that material?
Well, that's where the story gets complicated again. Because even though the official conclusion was negative, there are still these lingering questions about what really happened.
Such as,
For one thing, if the results were essentially random, if it was all just wishful thinking and confirmation bias, why did the U.S. government persist for over 2 decades?
that's a fair point. 23 years is a long time to chase a completely fictional capability.
Right? These weren't gullible civilians at a psychic fair. These were seasoned intelligence officers, military personnel, trained scientists.
People whose jobs literally depended on being able to separate real information from noise.
Exactly. So what kept them interested for all those years? Was it just Cold War desperation, bureaucratic inertia, the influence of true believers in high places?
Or did they actually witness something that science can't yet explain?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And here's another wrinkle. Did psychic research in government really end in 1995?
You think it might have continued in secret?
Officially, no known successors to Stargate exist. But Edwin May, who was the final program director, has continued researching this stuff privately. And occasionally, rumors surface
What kind of rumors?
that intelligence agencies in Russia or China might still be exploring ESP for espionage, that some aspects of remote viewing research went deeper underground rather than disappearing entirely.
Which would make sense, wouldn't it? I mean, if there was even a small chance it worked,
You'd want to keep investigating it, especially if you thought your adversaries might still be doing it. It's the same logic that started the program in the first place,
The psychic gap continues.
potentially. And get this, academic researchers are still studying the Stargate data. As recently as 2023, scientists have been reanalyzing those old remote viewing experiments, looking for statistical patterns.
Really? What are they finding?
That's the thing. The jury's still out. Some researchers claim they've identified subtle but consistent patterns in the data that can't be easily explained by conventional means.
And others?
Others argue that any apparent patterns are just artifacts of flawed experimental design or statistical noise.
So we're still having the same debates today that they were having in 1995.
Pretty much. Which brings us back to the fundamental questions that Project Stargate raises. What are the actual limits of human consciousness? How much don't we know about what the mind is capable of?
And maybe more importantly, how do we balance open-mindedness with healthy skepticism?
Exactly, V. Because here's what I find most fascinating about this whole story. It's not really about whether psychic powers are real or not.
No.
It's about human nature, about how we respond to uncertainty, how we make decisions under pressure, how we balance hope with evidence.
The Cold War made people so paranoid about falling behind that they were willing to explore anything that might give them an edge.
Right. What if it works? Is powerful reasoning when you're terrified that your enemies might have capabilities you don't understand?
And honestly, I can kind of see the logic. If the Soviets really were developing psychic spies and you ignored it,
You'd look like an idiot when they started reading your nuclear launch codes telepathically.
exactly. So maybe the real question isn't whether Stargate was a success or failure, but whether it was a reasonable response to the information they had at the time.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. Given what they knew about Soviet research into parapsychology, given the stakes of the Cold War, given the potential payoff if it actually worked.
Maybe spending $20 million over 20 years wasn't completely crazy.
Especially when you consider how much money we spent on conventional intelligence capabilities during the same period. 20 million is pocket change compared to the cost of spy satellites or stealth aircraft.
True, and if remote viewing had worked, if they could have sat in Maryland and psychically monitored Soviet missile sites,
It would have revolutionized intelligence gathering. No more need for risky human agents, no more billion-dollar technical collection systems.
just close your eyes and see what the enemy is up to.
The ultimate intelligence capability, which makes you wonder, what if they had been right? What if human consciousness really does have these hidden depths we haven't discovered yet?
Now, that's a scary thought. Imagine if governments actually could train psychic spies.
Privacy would become a meaningless concept. Military secrets would be impossible to keep. The entire balance of global power could shift overnight.
On the flip side, if it really worked, maybe we'd have fewer wars. Hard to launch a surprise attack when your enemies can literally see it coming.
True. Psychic detente.
But we're probably getting ahead of ourselves here. The scientific consensus is still that ESP doesn't exist, right?
That's correct. Most scientists maintain that there's no known mechanism by which the human brain could perceive distant events or objects without sensory input,
And extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
which Project Stargate, despite 23 years of trying, never provided to the satisfaction of the scientific community.
So, where does that leave us with this story?
With a fascinating chapter in intelligence history that raises more questions than it answers. Project Stargate stands as this weird intersection of science, security, and the supernatural.
A modern myth about the limits of human potential.
Exactly. And whether you see it as a cautionary tale about the dangers of wishful thinking, or as evidence that we still have mysteries to solve about consciousness,
It definitely makes you think about what we don't know versus what we think we know.
right? And honestly, I'm not sure which possibility is more unsettling, that psychic powers are real and our government spent decades trying to weaponize them, or that they're complete fiction and we wasted all that time and money chasing phantoms.
You know what the weirdest part is for me?
What's that?
Somewhere out there right now, there are probably former Stargate personnel at cocktail parties trying to explain their careers. Yeah, I used to be a psychic spy for the Army.
Sure you were, Bob. And I'm secretly Batman.
No, really. I have declassified documents.
Right next to your alien autopsy photos, I'm sure.
The truth really is stranger than fiction sometimes.
Always, V. Always. So, what do you think after hearing this whole saga? Do you believe there's any chance at all, that some of these remote viewing sessions actually worked?
You know what, Kevin? Part of me wants to believe it. There's something romantically appealing about the idea that human consciousness has these hidden capabilities we haven't discovered yet.
But
But the skeptic in me looks at 23 years of research that couldn't produce a single verified intelligence breakthrough and thinks, if it really worked, wouldn't we still be doing it?
unless we are, and it's just so classified that we'll never know about it,
Okay, now that's legitimately terrifying.
sorry to give you nightmares about psychic government surveillance.
Great, now I'm going to be self conscious about my thoughts for the next week.
Well, folks, that's our deep dive into Project Stargate, the U.S. government's ambitious, expensive, and ultimately inconclusive attempt to create psychic spies. Whether you think it's a fascinating glimpse into unexplored human potential or a cautionary tale about the power of belief over evidence.
We genuinely want to hear what you think. Drop your theories in the comments. Do you believe any of the remote viewing successes were real? Do you think psychic research is still happening somewhere in classified government programs?
Maybe you have your own experiences with ESP or remote viewing that you want to share. We promise we won't forward them to any intelligence agencies. And hey, if any former Stargate personnel are listening, we'd love to hear your side of the story.
Just maybe leave out any details that are still classified. We don't need the CIA showing up at our studio.
Thanks for joining us on another dark dive into the strange, hidden, and untold. And if you enjoyed this dive into government secrets and psychic spies, make sure to check out our previous episode on simulation theory. Because if you thought remote viewing was mind-bending,
Wait until you hear the evidence that we might all be living inside a computer program. It'll make you question literally everything about reality.
until next time, keep questioning everything.
And maybe keep your thoughts to yourself. You never know who might be listening.